I've been looking forward to speaking with Ady because I've followed his story, which has been incredibly inspiring. I'm aware of his activism, particularly as it relates to healthcare, which is such a huge issue in this country. He's standing up for people who need someone to do so.
Coach Kerr, thank you very much for making time for our conversation on American politics and healthcare policy, especially at this crucial moment in the NBA season, as your Warriors are fighting for a spot in the playoffs. You've already lost the season series to my beloved Portland Trail Blazers, the greatest franchise in NBA history, and I know that this year is a hard one. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Ady. And you know, I was once a trailblazer myself. 2001 season, I played for Portland, and I am very fond of the Trailblazers franchise, although they're not the best franchise in NBA history.
Let's agree that they are at least top 3 greatest franchises.
Okay, we'll settle on top 3. I think that's a good place to meet.
At first glance, you and I don't have a lot in common. You're an 8-time champion, a world-class shooter, and one of the most successful coaches in NBA history. I, meanwhile, am a completely paralyzed dude who rarely leaves the house, but in at least 2 ways, we actually had similar childhoods. For one, we both loved shooting hoops in the driveway. We each made many of our shots and we both missed many shots. On a much more serious note, we were both raised by academics. My parents are historians and your parents also taught at university. I think most folks watching this don't know about your very interesting childhood or what happened to your family when you were a teen.
My dad was a professor at UCLA, political science professor. And so we used to go to the UCLA games back when UCLA was dominating college basketball. And that's how I fell in love with the game. But one of the things I was really blessed with in my childhood was the opportunity to travel. And my dad took several sabbaticals from UCLA and traveled to the Middle East. I was really blessed to get kind of a world view at a young age.
And do you want to tell folks what happened to your dad?
My dad had been born and raised in Beirut, and his parents taught at the American University in Beirut. And so his dream was to be the president there, and he was named president there in 1982. He was tragically killed by assassins in 1984, just a few months after he had arrived on campus. And it was sort of the beginning of that period of terrorism against Americans in the Middle East. So he was targeted because he was a prominent American in Beirut at the time. Obviously, a terrible, terrible time for our family, and something I think about, you know, pretty much every day. For me, I think, you know, my family and I came together, you know, after my dad was killed. We supported each other as any grieving family would do. We leaned on each other.
Thank you for sharing that powerful and difficult story. I want to talk a bit about politics in the NBA, and how it has changed over the past few decades. In the 90s, you played alongside Michael Jordan. He was obviously a magnificent basketball player and a fierce competitor, but he was not interested in politics. Famously, in 1990, Michael refused to express an opinion about the United States Senate race in his home state of North Carolina. This was particularly notable because the election pitted the racist incumbent, Jesse Helms, against Harvey Gantt, the mayor of Charlotte, a decent and smart public servant. When asked why he refused to endorse Gantt, Michael Jordan said that Republicans buy basketball sneakers too. You have also seen up close another contender for the title of the greatest of all time, LeBron James. LeBron plays a very different kind of basketball, and he also takes a very different approach to public life. He speaks out on issues of social injustice. And, I believe, he even pushed the NBA players to consider a prolonged strike last season to protest systemic racism and the incessant murder of black people by police. I have a 2-part question. First, who is the GOAT, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? And second, Why do you think LeBron and this generation are so much more outspoken about politics and social issues?
Yeah, two great questions. My belief is that Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time, and that LeBron James is the second greatest of all time. But of course I'm biased because Michael basically gave me 3 championship rings, so I definitely owe him. But they're both just breathtaking players. The 90s were a time when athletes generally didn't speak out, but also we weren't asked very often about politics. So times have really changed, 25, 30 years later. As athletes, as coaches, we are asked about social issues and politics all the time. And that's done 2 things. Number one, it's given athletes a greater platform than ever. But number 2, it's inspired a movement because the athletes and coaches and even entertainers, people in the limelight have realized that they can lead and they can inspire a lot of change. There's no doubt in my mind that the Atlanta Dream, the WNBA team in Atlanta, played a huge role in the Senate races in Georgia. I know you know the story, but Kelly Loeffler is also the owner of the Atlanta Dream, and her own team campaigned for her opponent, Raphael Warnock. This became just a bizarre dynamic that had to be unprecedented. They used their notoriety to try to influence people, to try to get people to register to vote. That was the ultimate example for all athletes and all people out there in a position of power to realize just how they can use that power.
That is such an important point. Those women totally changed the course of American politics, and we are all in their debt. I want to talk about healthcare. I'm a proponent of strengthening Medicare and making it available to everyone. You played college ball for the great Lute Olson, one of the best college coaches of all time back in the 80s at Arizona. I'd imagine a lot of the guys you played with back then are starting to think about retirement now. For the ones who didn't make it big like you, do you think making everyone above 55 eligible for Medicare would help them?
There's no doubt as we all get older, we face so many challenges, health challenges. I have myself, over the last 5 years, I've had multiple back surgeries, and what has been hugely helpful for me is just having great healthcare and having access to great doctors and great advice. And it's not enough to think, well, I'm lucky that I have that. We have to go beyond that, and we have to say, no, everyone deserves this. Universal healthcare should be a right and not a privilege. All you have to do is think about, as you mentioned, teammates, friends, people who are entering retirement age, not having that insurance. It can be just devastating for a family.
Amen, Coach. From your mouth to the ears in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento. We have covered some heavy stuff, but I have a question that you are uniquely well suited to answer. Who is the greatest three-point shooting point guard you have ever seen? Is it the Celtics' Rajon Rondo, the Thunder's Russell Westbrook, or the Blazers' Damian Lillard?
Really? We're not going to mention Steph Curry? We're just going to kind of casually leave him out of the question? I guess that's what we're doing, so we'll go with Damian Lillard.
Coach, it's an honor and privilege to speak with you. Thank you for your leadership, your insights, and your solidarity.
Well, Ady, thank you for inspiring all of us with your activism. It's really beautiful to see, and so thank you for having me today, and we'll stay in touch.